Coming to you live from the heart of the free state of New Hampshire. This is The Independence with Carla Garrick. And now, here's your host, Carla Garrick.
Hey. Hi, guys, and welcome back to The Independence After Hours, right here in the studio at the Quill at a undisclosed location in Manchester. Welcome back. As you can see, I don't have a guest in the studio with me tonight. Why is that? Well, mostly because I didn't organize one or the people I reached out to had plans. But these are the things we are going to figure out over time. I am delighted to announce that we will have a guest next week. That will be Seth Hipple from Hipple and Martin. Seth actually was my attorney way back with my landmark First Amendment, First Circuit case. And so I think we will do a bit of a deep dive on the incident of 2010. And then, talk a little bit about the case and why it was so important, why it's in the news now again. Of course, most of us saw the shooting. I actually, to be honest, have not watched the video of the shooting in Minnesota because I choose not to consume that kind of content at the moment. And so I probably will look at it at some stage, but that wasn't a priority for me this week. But of course, the fact that that footage exists is in part thanks to that court case from back in the day. And so, what do I need to tell you guys before I get into my little swan song for Scott Adams? I triggered the entire some portion of our community this week with a couple of blog posts about Scott Adams. Of course, Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, passed away on Monday from what a lot of the internet is now calling turbo cancer. And he sort of evolved his positions with regard to things like vaccines over time, and sort of towards the end did admit perhaps that those of us who stood firm early on were in fact correct in our position. But the fight I got into with him had to do with not actually practicing what he preaches, which is persuasion, and taking things extremely personally and escalating things very quickly. But before we get into that, what can you guys do for me? If you're at home, if you're watching this, if you're watching on X, Facebook, YouTube, or maybe you see it later in some clips, please go to the FSP's website, freestateproject.org, fsp.org, and go get your tickets for Porcupine Day. That is Pork Day. It is coming up on the 3rd of February at Murphy's Tap Room in Bedford. Thank you to Murphy's for sponsoring the location and venue for us. Thank you to FSB DAC. So that is Free State Blockchain Digital Asset Conference that takes place every October. That's the Fentons out on the Seacoast. Many of you, in fact, may have seen that great little clip from earlier this week of the Lord with the white powder hair doing a speech. That was Bruce Fenton. So Bruce and his incredible wife, Carol Ann, who serves on the Free State Project board, will be sponsoring Pork Day again. So go to fsp.org / actually, I don't know what it's / and go find, actually just type in Free State Project Porcupine Day 2026. That'll probably get you there the fastest. If you missed it yesterday, the Pork Report with Eric Brakey, the FSP executive director, came out. That had special guest moi on the show to talk about Porcupine Day. So if you're a new follower, maybe check that out. We talked a little bit about the history of Porcupine Day, talked a little bit about the history of, some old OG uh, Free Stater history. And of course, that is really what I hope to do with this show. So I'm hoping the guests, i.e., you, are going to reach out to me. You can reach me at carla@carlagarrick.com and come tell your moving to New Hampshire story. If you haven't moved yet, we can actually accommodate Zoom calls here in the studio. We can have you call in. Maybe we could do a Q&A if you're curious. Someone can let me know what kind of content you guys want to see. But ultimately, part of the mission of this project as we sort of build out this whole broadcast channel that will hopefully represent many voices in the Free State. There are people creating really great content. Erin Day, Naomi Brockwell on privacy. We have a lot of crypto nerds here, so there's some great short podcasts. But we have so many people with so many interests and so many passions and so many little pet projects. And I want to capture all of that so that other people can hear us raise our voices, so that other people can get a sense of what the community is here in New Hampshire and what life actually on the ground is like, right? To actually talk to the people who have done this, who have moved here, who have made that change to live a liberty forward, intentional life. And that's the great part about the Free State is actually that it gives you a pathway. You know you're going to be moving to New Hampshire. You know you're going to get involved, whether it's gun rights or school rights or parental rights or free speech, maybe filming police officers, maybe doing investigative reporting, maybe writing code, maybe supporting crypto projects. Who knows what it is? But that is the beauty of it is you get to move here and then click in and fit in where it's going to work best for you. And then you have this sort of roadmap of, oh, I can change laws. I can go testify on bills and all of that stuff. Get involved in organizations. If you don't see someone doing the thing you want, start your own organization. I certainly have over the years. And in fact, tomorrow morning, for people interested in right to know or open government, we have our monthly right to know board meeting that is open to new members. You can drop me a DM if you're watching this on any of those channels or email me at carla@carlagarrick.com and I can get you involved in that. That's open government advocacy. It's nonpartisan. It's not about politics. It is literally about how do we hold our government accountable. We can only do that if we know what they're doing, if there's transparency. And so that's another area to get involved in. All right, so that's sort of the backstory for all of it. Thank you again to everyone who is joining us on this Friday night. Oh my goodness, I am tired. So I'm going to do this part fairly quickly, hopefully. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit is I had this really weird run-in with Scott Adams back in 2022. And it really bubbled up again for me when he passed away this week. And I think it was because it's sort of an unresolved thing in my life. It's also because I have that sense, as we often do, if we're honest with ourselves, of he wronged me, and there's no sense of closure. And I think as humans, that's something we carry a lot, and we don't really know what to do with that energy. What I've learned over the years is what's fruitful for me is actually to write about it. Now, I do fancy myself a writer, and so maybe that's not going to work for everyone. Other people might have to call a friend, talk something through, but my process is writing and documenting. And in fact, that pork report that I did with Eric yesterday, we were talking about the history of the Free State Project and how we do need to capture these stories, but also how, we should be creating a record of what actually really happened, right? And so, what actually really happened is that Scott Adams basically lost his mind on a Twitter thread with me because I used the term dude to open. And honestly, I'm saying it now like dude. But when I did it, I was like, dude, like, yeah, come help me. Right. And so I think that's important too, is on the internet, you often cannot tell. Is the person being like, dude, or are they being like, dude, or are they being like, dude, come on, right? Like you don't know. And so if you don't know, but if you claim you're a master of persuasion, perhaps you should find out before you respond as he did. All right, so I wrote this blog was the first one. It's called The Swan Song for Scott Adams. And since I can't probably say any of these words without going to YouTube censorship prison, I hope everyone can see the screen. But let's just say if you are familiar with the George Carlin words, he used all of those and then a couple of British ones. And then threw in some, no one will want to have the, the, the nasty with me for good measure. Now, perhaps you're wondering, geez, Carla, what did you say to Scott Adams to send him on this deep and dark path? So here's what happened. Here's what happened. I said, dude, if you were independently following the data, this was 100% clear. But I am really glad you're coming around. Now help us get Nuremberg 2 going. Heads must roll. And then in parentheses, I am speaking metaphorically mostly. So, dude, if you were independently following the data, this was 100% clear. But I'm really glad you are coming around. And then I asked for help, right? So it will seem inconceivable, I think, to most of you. I'm going to see if this is the one with the actual screen grabs. Yes. So to that, so his tweet actually was about, I think it was from the CDC had a video that came out and they were like, oh, we never tested to see if it stops transmission. And so he said, we always knew we didn't have enough information. It's new to me to learn they never tried to get the data. And that's when I said the dude part. And then he replied with, you were independently following the data that was not collected. Good for you. So if we're looking at the art of persuasion, right? He actually answered me with mockery. Like he wasn't like I started and I actually said, hey, I'm glad you're coming around. That is me trying to embrace him into a circle and then asking for help. That is what that email, my tweet to him did, right? And then I replied with, yes, big bulb. Now, I actually want to qualify something here because when I went back and I looked at that, I was like, geez, what was I thinking? But here's actually what I was thinking is I was thinking he's a cartoonist and he's going to understand I'm actually calling him smart because I'm saying the big bulb like that goes off over your head when you have like a bright idea. And English is my second language, although, I mean, I'm obviously quite fluent. And afterwards, like actually, honestly, when I went back to pull these, I was like, oh, I wonder if he thought I was insulting his looks because he is a bold man. And I was like, oh, but see, he never, ever said something about those words. So I feel like artist to artist, he got that one. But he did go on about the dude part, right? So I said, yes, it's called extrapolating conclusions from the lack of data. If they tell you it's safe and there's no data to prove it's safe, one can conclude they cannot prove their claim. We critical thinkers also call that a tell. And then he just goes off, right? But here's the interesting thing is My background is legal. I used to do a fair amount of risk assessment work, and even in science, you got to be able to prove your claims. And so it was very clear to us who were very active in the health freedom sector. I wasn't willy-nilly sort of coming up with these ideas. Like we were doing deep dives. I mean, I was incredibly censored during this time. So in some ways I feel deeply frustrated because um one does have that sense of, oh, maybe if more people had heard us, or if more people um, sort of understood. So some of the deep dives I was doing is I was looking at patent applications between different countries because they would redact different things in patent applications. One of the other things I felt very strongly about is that people should know how many criminal fines these pharma organizations have paid over the years for malfeasance, sometimes where they are admitting to intentional fraud. Now, I actually would use the DOJ, the Department of Justice of the United States of America's own press release to ding Pfizer, and all of that content got removed. So it is possible that people really, truly didn't have a sense. But I'm telling you, some of us did, and it wasn't because we lucked out, as Scott said. It was because we were better informed. We'd been studying this issue for far longer than they had, and because we were not worshiping at the altar of mad scientism. And now I want to stand still with that for a hot second. So here is a reality. There is a trope, a thing, a form of storytelling, the monster from Frankenstein on. But there have been cartoons and comic books and stories and sci-fi and anime and all of it made about the mad scientist, the lunatic with the hair, not as cool as mine, and the white lab coat. And it's like everyone seemed to forget, why does that trope exist? It exists because it's real, and because we should be very, very careful with scientism, as many, many people discovered post COVID. So then he goes on to say, look, bitch, you're conflating. We didn't try to check with insufficient data and claiming victory as if they're the same. I tried to let you off easy. So here I do another sort of good rhetorical device. Like I actually call it out, right? I'm like, look, bitch. And then I say classy. And then I actually express sympathy. I say, I'm sorry you feel duped, because you were. Many of us knew and tried to warn people like you were being played. We didn't try to check was clear in the data itself, because if they didn't make the disclosures to support their claim, claims. Do you understand now? Again, with an open-ended question. And here's the other thing. So we all talk about, oh, we should use clear language and we should mean what we say and we should do all of that. But I get the sense a lot of times when I'm discoursing online, if it is male to female, the males just actually read in sarcasm where it's not there. On the plain reading of the words, I was being literal. Do you understand now? And then classy, maybe I don't need to be a punching bag for assholes such as yourself who don't recall my opinions but have strong opinions about your false memories. So now he's making it all about himself in a really weird way, and goes on to say, I predict that the shots wouldn't work, never changed. So then I go into a side note where I said he's calling me names and I'm not in the mood. And then he comes back and he's like, who started the name calling, cunt? Seriously. And I'm like, laugh out loud. Okay, dude, I think your prions are folding. I'll let you go have a moment in the corner with your bitchy cunt dunce hat. P.S. You might want to research prions folding so that you're better informed and not caught off guard again. It's another side effect. Then he calls me a twat. Then he tells me to go fuck myself. No one else will. And then I say, and I earnestly meant this, wow, do you need help? And then he says, you're surprised that starting a conversation with an insult didn't go your way, fucking idiot. And I said, what was the insult? Dude? Dude. And then he said, you started with a sexist, dismissive insult and then proceeded to make an uninformed point that showed no understanding of my views. I'm like, does the dude not understand? I wasn't talking about his views. I was actually talking about my views and asking him, as a very famous person with a huge platform, to step up and to come help the people who were trying to get the word out. And some of these people have been doing it since the 90s. And most of those people are angry mommies who know they took their children to doctors and their kids came back weird. So I was not horrible and wrong as claimed by him. And I am owning it right now. And then I ended and walked away. And I said, we can all see this exchange for what it is, right? And then I walked away. And then he, and we'll get to this little picture in a moment. He actually went in later. He blocked me. And then he, we could go over this argument here, but basically I just want to get to the part where he blocked me and then he went back and he deleted the email. So he erased parts of the conversation, which I had the forbearance to save. And here's kind of the point I want to make. So it's twofold. First of all, he failed at his own framework, right? So the dude's famous for, and I want to stand still just for a hot second again with dude. So when I moved to America back in the good old days, so this is 1996, I moved to California and I discovered the word dude. And I fell in love with that word. And I fell in love with that word because it can be used in so many ways to express different things. But the reason I loved it is because in South Africa, things were extremely controlled. It was a police state. You had to be really careful. There were very considered ways people were supposed to address each other. I actually still called my grandmother thou in Afrikaans. And so when I discovered this unisex word that could be used for men and women that sort of embraced what to me felt like the best of America, like sort of the cool, super dude kind of vibes, but also it was taking off in pop culture. So I have an affinity for the word. And indeed, a dear friend of mine, Whitney Rossman, who died at a very young age in her mid-30s of cancer a few years ago, that was like her favorite word. And that is literally why we became friends, because we were on a boat together and we were just duding. And it was like amazing. And so for me to look at this exchange with a famous man who was on a public square, which means it's like you're in a park, and I said, dude, and he called me a cunt, twat, bitch, like idiot who no one will fuck, right? And it just doesn't seem commiserative. And my point is, he was in the wrong. And besides Bill Barger, who, came in and complained about all my essays on Facebook this morning, but he did defend me back then. So thanks, Bill. to say, "Hey, Scott Adams, how dare you call this woman a bitch? She's the reason we can all film cops." And that's a true story. And you can learn more about it next week when we have Seth Hipple here to talk about the Weir incident. But my point is, he failed on his own framework. He wasn't persuasive, he was reactive, he was reacting from a place of ego. And no one defended me back then except Bill. And yet today and yesterday and the day before, when I posted my thoughts on this whole thing that happened, oh, suddenly everyone came out of the woodwork, guys. I mean, hi, Jack Spirico, who I brought to speak at our events, a homesteader. Um, Carla, you should, I say this with love, shut the fuck up. Stop talking about it. This guy's like, don't say it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you know what everyone, in my opinion, should have done? They should have been like, oh my God, that is horrible. I imagine you don't have closure because the guy died. Oh, you know what? I wrote to his biographer because I thought, wow, because that guy's South African. And it seemed zeitgeisty that I connected with him on X, and I was like, "Hey, if you're looking for a redemption arc, maybe, we can have a discussion with Scott and he can kind of be like, "Oh, yeah, my bad. Like, let's not leave this as a taste in the universe forever." He was a teacher. He was someone who used humor. He was someone who used persuasion. He was someone I looked up to, which is why I'm butthurt. And he was someone who was acting like that with those words in public. And none of us should find that acceptable. I mean, no one should be speaking like that to each other. And the fact that he thought he could do that and then just block me and do a whole show, by the way, on whether dude is sexist or not. And the entire internet was like, nah, dude, it ain't, right? So he was in the wrong and yet could not take the accountability to be like, my bad, right? And I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem for us in our community. And I don't know if it's like, I don't know what it is. I think it's pride cometh before the fall. I think it's people who haven't done the actual ego work and possibly aren't aligned. And you know what? Sure, maybe he was having a bad day. But, I actually tried to follow up and be like, hey, I think you should unblock me. I think we can like fix this. We can make it a teachable moment. There was none of that. There was none of that possible repair. And I see these kinds of things happen in the community. And I saw how it was all men who got flared up about this. And they're like, no, let it go. And fine. I mean, maybe I will, maybe I won't. You're entitled to your opinion. That's just your opinion, man. I'm entitled to my opinion. And in my opinion, Scott Adams sucked on this particular little thing. All right, so I am going to tie this photo at the top here into it all. So if you cannot see this, I will describe it if you're just listening to me. There is a cartoon that I found on the internet or on someone's feed, I think, saying it's a photo of 3 ICE officers holding guns and balaclavas. Their faces are hidden, all these things that we now accept as normal that we didn't, because we know people who walk around with masks on their faces are probably bad guys. Yeah, the whole COVID thing. So there is the Statue of Liberty. Lady Liberty is kind of sprawled out on the ground. She's dropped her torch and she is laying with her arms akimbo, staring up at the sky. She looks like she's probably deado. And the Ice Baby dude is saying fucking bitch. So that all happened too when they shot and killed a woman for saying she was not mad at him. All right, so why did I pick that picture? Because When disgust becomes casual and dangerous, I think we are in a bad spot. So we are seeing a broader cultural pattern in how men in positions of power react when a woman resists or questions authority. This is a pattern that shows up across contexts, from trivial to lethal, with the same reflexive contempt. So that cartoon, which reflects what happened in Minneapolis this month, where the officer had just shot and killed someone, and then said, fucking bitch. All right. Like, I don't know, guys. This is not good. This is not acceptable. This is not decent human behavior. This is hatred. And when that level of hatred starts to take over, it is hard to dial back. So I think like now is the time, right? Like, this is why we have to lead with love, because you reap what you sow. And I don't want to sow a whole sea of people yelling fucking bitch at me all day. All right. So that guy's language wasn't private. It was recorded. It was published. And obviously, I'm not saying these things are the same. I'm actually just trying to point out the reason why we even have that recording that guy did that is because of the work I did on my court case. So, when people responded to these essays I put out this week, people were saying, oh, you know what? This is unnecessary. It's too much. It's beneath you. But no one has said maybe it was kind of beneath him. And here's another problem. It is because of the struggle with ignoring primarily, although not exclusively, the woman. There were lots of whistleblowers. Wakefield springs to mind. There were doctors who came forward. But really, there was a lot of gaslighting of women and mothers back then, including, honestly, telling people autism is a genetic disease. How can you have an epidemic of genetics? It does not make sense. All right, so mommies have been ignored for a long time while we were yelling about things like safety of these products, the liability shields, right? They took immunity for themselves. They made it really hard to put in claims. And I think even most of our folks are discovering there is a fundamental lack of data in vaccine science. And vaccine science, if you can't tell from my voice, I'm using giant air quotes here, is akin to smoking science. And maybe all of you will recall it took about 50 years to persuade Congress after the collusion of big tobacco with big business with some deep pockets that, oh, actually smoking is bad for you. And they knew from the start it was a cover story, and they did that exact same play with vaccines. And some of us saw that from the start, and we've been saying it, and we've been sidelined or we've been ignored. So the redemption arc that never happened. I'm going to talk about the fact that, I mean, he just was wrong in that exchange. And honestly, you know what? If you guys don't agree with that, maybe you don't agree with that, then come on my show and let's have that conversation. Because maybe everyone out there watching this is going to be like, no, Carla, you totally got what you deserved. You called the guy a big bulb. Didn't seem to upset him. He didn't bring that up once. Oh, my lady part's got a good running through, though. So here is the reality is, instead of asking, why did Scott Adams react that way? Everyone is telling me, why can't I let it go? And this feels very familiar because, again, this is sort of the story of my life. I've always been early on things, $6 Bitcoin, I see things early. I got in with the Free State Project way back in 2008. I signed up in 2003. I have, predicted silver prices, gold, solid money, what we're building here. And again, this is a topic that I have been interested in for decades. And whether it's vaccines or the censorship or the regulatory capture or government overreach or power dynamics or just how we are tolerating bad behavior and letting it go because of brilliance. And that is not good enough. All of that preserves a hierarchy where the people at the top of that hierarchy want to have the view and they want to stand up there without doing the accountability. And yes, I mean people like Scott Adams, because if they're going to be the leaders we want to emulate, then we should also expect them to stand tall and to be people we want to respect. I mean, I genuinely I lost all my respect for him. I just did. You know. And of course, the truth of that is I lost my respect for him, but I still have that hankering for closure, which maybe this is it, and then we'll move on and it'll become a good story. But I want to leave you guys with this, right? So if my rant tonight is making you angry, or if my essays, which you can get on my website, carlagericke.com, that's CarlaGerikke.com. Please, can the AI figure that out? I have put that name in all the things and it still puts it wrong on the little blurbs. But if tonight's rant has made you angry, and your instinct is to correct me rather than to examine Scott Adams's behavior, that's not my work to do for you. That's for you to figure out. You have to work on noticing why accountability feels like an attack. You have to ask why a woman pointing out clear failure feels more threatening than the failure itself. And you have to ask why admitting error feels like annihilation instead of growth, right? Sure, Scott Adams is gone, right? But this pattern that protects him and was turned on me is very much alive. And until that changes, we're going to keep losing allies that we could have had. I think that is really honestly the reason why I remain upset about this, because I do think he could have, and maybe he did, I don't know. He blocked me, right? I have no idea what the dude's been up to. Um, but that he really could have made a bigger difference. And I think over time, what's going to happen is he may very well become the poster child for the anti-vaccine movement. And I, of course, will take kind of deep pleasure in that. All right, so I'm super excited because someone just knocked on the door, which means I can wrap this up for the evening. I had more things to say, but that feels like enough. I am going to remind everyone, Porcupine Day coming up on the 3rd of February. Get your tickets today. General admission $50, VIP $100. That comes with a keepsake. We're going to do some history of the Free State. It is on a Tuesday, so we can get the whole Taproom Tuesday crew in as well. Should be a really fun night, but of course, it can only be fun if you're there. So please do go buy those tickets. It is a fundraiser for the FSP, helps to keep the lights on for Eric, and take some stress off all the plans and projects we have for the rest of the year. That's my story for tonight. I wish everyone peace, love, and understanding. And I will see everyone back here again on Monday for an update on what is coming up in the Free State. And the one thing you should know, next Friday, HB 1441. It is the study commission to make New Hampshire its own little country. And I would love it if you would plan to come testify. I'll talk more about that on Monday, and I will see everyone back here again then. Bye.